The night was eerily still, with only the distant hum of crickets and the soft rustling of leaves breaking the silence. The moon hung full and cold above the river, casting a silver glow across the water's surface, which shimmered like a sheet of broken glass. A solitary figure stood at the edge of the embankment, trembling, her arms wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. Ice's breath came in shallow gasps. Her silk shawl clung damply to her shoulders as she backed away, step by desperate step. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, locked onto the woman approaching her with slow, deliberate steps, heels crunching softly on the gravel. "Marina, please," Aisha whispered, voice catching in her throat. Marina's red lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. Her designer coat was unbuttoned, swaying slightly in the breeze, as if mocking the gravity of the moment. "You should have stayed quiet," she said coldly, each word sharp and precise. "You were never meant to survive in his world. You were just an inconvenience." Aisha's foot slipped slightly near the river's edge. She reached out instinctively, but there was nothing. No railing, no tree, no hand offered in help. Just the echo of her own panic and the river's hungry silence. "I'm pregnant," she cried, desperation seeping into every syllable. "I know," Marina said and with one sudden, calculated motion, a shove, a scream pierced the air. It was short, cut off by the splash as Aisha's body hit the water below. The surface shattered like a mirror, swallowing her whole, leaving only ripples and the eerie silence that followed. Marina stood above, motionless, watching the water settle. Her face was expressionless now, except for a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips, the smile of a woman who believed she had just erased a mistake. The moonlight glinted off her earrings as she turned and walked away, heels clicking with each step, vanishing into the darkness as though she had never been there at all. The cold hit her first, a brutal, numbing shock that stole the breath from her lungs as the river swallowed her whole. The current ceased. Her body, like a monster, awakened, dragging her beneath the surface before she could scream again. Her arms flailed instinctively, reaching for something, anything, to hold on to. But there was only darkness and water. Aisha kicked with what little strength she had, trying to fight upward toward the surface. Her heavy clothes tangled around her legs like shackles. She gasped when her head finally broke through, coughing and choking, her hair plastered to her face. "Help!" She tried to shout, but the river carried her further downstream, the moonlight flashing above in broken glimpses as waves crashed around her. The baby, terror gripped her chest harder than the water. Her hands moved instantly to cradle her belly, as best she could while treading water. A searing thought ran through her. My child must live. That thought, more than any instinct, kept her limbs moving. The river showed no mercy. It hurled her into submerged branches, scraped her skin against jagged rocks, and pulled her deeper each time she tried to rise. She couldn't tell how long. She'd been in the water, seconds felt like hours. Her arms ached. Her lungs burned. Aisha's mind blurred between memory and present, flashes of Zafar's face, the day he kissed her forehead and promised forever, the warmth of their wedding night, the cold betrayal of recent weeks, and Marina's smile, that twisted, triumphant smile. Above the riverbank, another swirl of water pulled her under. This time, she didn't fight as hard. Exhaustion was winning. Her limbs grew sluggish, and her vision darkened at the edges. Her fingers opened, reaching not for rescue, but for peace. If this was the end, she prayed her child felt none of it. But just as the dark began to take her, her hand brushed something, rough and solid. A piece of driftwood or a half-submerged log. She clutched it with fading strength. Her fingers dug into the bark as though anchoring herself to the world. Somewhere, Through the rushing of the water and her thudding heartbeat, she heard a distant voice. A lantern flickered along the shore. Someone was yelling, a man, she thought. Her eyes fluttered, barely open. The river hadn't won yet. The child inside her stirred, a fluttering kick, not pain, but a reminder. You're still alive. We're still here. She didn't know where. The current was taking her. She only knew that she wasn't alone in this fight. Not anymore, Dot, and somehow, impossibly, that gave her the strength to hold on just a little longer. The sun had barely begun to rise, painting the river in soft hues of orange and gold when Haroun guided his worn-out boat toward the banks, near the old reed bed. He'd lived by this river his whole life, waking before dawn, casting nets in silence, speaking only when spoken to, which wasn't often. The villagers called him the ghost with a fishing rod. He preferred it that way, but today something felt wrong. The birds were quieter, the air heavier. As Haroun pulled in a small catch of silver fish, his eyes were drawn to an odd shape tangled among the reeds, something pale and unmoving. He narrowed his gaze. It wasn't driftwood, it wasn't debris, it was a body, ya Allah, he whispered, dropping his net and maneuvering his boat closer. His boots splashed into the shallow water as he jumped out, pushing through the reeds. The woman lay half submerged, limp, her black hair fanned out like seaweed. Her skin was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue. Mud clung to her clothes, and blood traced a thin line from her temple. Haroun crouched beside her, checking her neck for a pulse. Faint, but there Dot, and then he saw it, the soft, unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly under the soaked fabric. She's with child, he muttered in disbelief, heart pounding. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, as though the river had already drained her of life. He cradled her protectively and carried her to his boat, laying her gently on a wool blanket. Rain began to drizzle, soft and steady, as if the sky mourned what had nearly been lost. He rowed back swiftly, the oars slicing through the water. His mind raced. He had no idea who she was or how she ended up in his part of the river. But one thing was clear. She had survived something terrible, back in his weathered cottage tucked behind tall trees. Haroun lit a fire and wrapped her in warm quilts. He cleaned the gash on her head, laid a damp cloth on her brow, and sat beside her as the storm outside grew stronger. I don't know who you are, he said softly, but you're safe now, and I swear I'll keep you that way. The woman didn't stir, but her chest rose and fell, faint, steady. She was still fighting Dot, and now she didn't have to fight. Alone, Dot, by mid-morning, the city was buzzing. The headline spread like wildfire. Pregnant wife of millionaire vanishes mysteriously after gala dispute. Zafar Malik's marriage drama turns dark foul play suspected. Mistress or murderer. Socialite Marina Qureshi seen arguing with missing wife. Zafar Malik sat stiffly in his high-rise office, the panoramic view of the cityscape doing little to ease the pressure building behind his eyes. A thick file of printed headlines and screenshots of social media speculation sat on his desk. His PR manager, Nita, paced behind him like a cat on hot coals. We need to get ahead of this, she said, thrusting a draft statement into his hands. This version paints you as a concerned husband blindsided by your wife's sudden disappearance. We leave out the affair. For now, Zafar barely looked up. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest of his leather chair. She just vanished. He muttered. Well, Nita said cautiously, the CCTV footage shows her exiting the riverside garden around midnight. No further footage, no witnesses. That works in our favor. Zafar leaned forward, eyes hardening. The press won't. Stay quiet forever. They'll dig. Someone will talk. Marina is handling it. Nita interrupted quickly, the though the tremor in her voice betrayed her doubt. She's already issued a short statement denying any altercation with Aisha. Claims she left the gala early, Zafar scoffed. He knew Marina better than anyone. Behind that velvet smile and glass of champagne was a woman with claws and secrets. If the truth came out, his entire reputation, business empire, and legacy would be ruined, but appearances had to be maintained by noon. Zafar and his team released a carefully worded public statement. We are deeply concerned about the sudden disappearance of my beloved wife, Aisha. I urge the public and media to respect our family's privacy during this difficult time while law enforcement continues the investigation. Aisha, if you see this, please come home. You are deeply missed. It was accompanied by a series of staged photos. Zafar looking solemn, Marina absent from all frames. A security team was deployed. Donations were made to local search and rescue departments. Candles were lit. Crocodile tears were shed. Behind closed doors, however, Zafar was unraveling. He hadn't expected Aisha to vanish without a trace. And if she was still alive, he had no idea where she was or what she might remember. The lie was spreading fast. But so was the fear, because somewhere out there, the truth was floating just beneath the surface, waiting to resurface. Marina Qureshi adjusted the diamond necklace around her neck, letting the light hit it just so as she studied her reflection in the vanity mirror. Her makeup was flawless, her dress sleek and sculpted, not a single detail out of place. Perfection, after all, was part of the illusion. The scandal that had shaken the city just days ago was already starting to shift. In her favor, Aisha's mysterious disappearance had created a vacuum, one Marina stepped into with ease. Where others saw tragedy, she saw opportunity. She had moved into Zafar's penthouse 2 nights after the incident, not officially, of course. But her perfume now lingered in the halls and her heels clicked with confidence on the marble floors. The house staff, once loyal to Aisha, had either resigned silently or adapted quickly. Marina made sure of that. I want no gossip, she told them sharply, sipping espresso as she scanned morning headlines. And no one, I mean no one, mentions Aisha's name in this house again. Understood. The maids nodded silently. Fear, she had learned, was often more effective than charmed out at the office. Marina's presence became more than just tolerated. It was expected. Zafar, distracted and anxious, leaned on her more with each passing day. She attended meetings in his stead, fielded calls from investors, even answered a few soft interviews with carefully scripted sympathy. I'm just trying to support Zafar through this terrible time, she told one talk show host, blinking. Back fake tears. He's devastated. Aisha was like a sister to me. Behind closed doors, however, Marina was far from grieving. She paid off the lone server who had seen her and Aisha arguing outside the gala, enough to silence him, and send him packing to another province. The gardener who maintained the riverside hedges had been offered a hefty envelope of cash and a thinly veiled threat about what would happen to his family if he spoke out. Even the security footage from that night, raw, unedited, had mysteriously gone missing from the archives. Marina was meticulous. Every loose thread tied, every risk neutralized. And yet beneath the surface of her newfound power, a flicker of paranoia remained. Aisha's body had not been found. The police had assumed she had drowned and washed away downstream, but Marina knew the river well. Things rarely vanished without a trace. Still, Marina reminded herself, appearances are everything. She smiled more in public now, took charity selfies, posted poetic tributes to Aisha on her social media. The mask was in place to the world. She was the grieving friend, the elegant support system, the woman holding a broken man together, but behind the mascara and the diamonds, Marina was finally getting what she always wanted, Zafar's world, and she wasn't going to give it up. No matter what came back from the water, the scent of wood smoke and boiled herbs clung to the air as Aisha slowly opened her eyes. Everything was hazy dim light, a low ceiling of wooden beams, the quiet crackle of fire. Her body ached, each movement stiff and unfamiliar. Her hand instinctively slid over her belly to pat the baby, still there, still safe. A soft breath of relief escaped her lips before the pain returned in sharp waves across her ribs and shoulders. She tried to sit up but collapsed back onto the lumpy mattress with a groan. The door creaked open. A woman entered carrying a bowl of warm porridge. She was in her 50s, wrapped in a faded floral shawl, her expression firm but kind. "You're awake," the woman said simply. "Thank God." Aisha stared, lips parting to speak, but her throat was dry and raw. The woman helped her sit, propping pillows behind her, and held a tin cup to her lips. "I'm Naji. My son Haroon found you in the river," she explained. "You've been unconscious for almost 3 days." Aisha drank, letting the warmth coat her throat. Her mind was foggy. Bits and pieces floated up Marina's cold eyes, the fall, the river, then darkness. She touched the bandage on her forehead. Her voice came out hoarse. "Where am I?" Naji placed the bowl in her lap. "Chamarket, small village, off the main highway. You're safe here." Safe. The word struck Aisha like an unfamiliar lullaby. Later that evening, Haroon returned from fishing, his boots muddy, his face weathered by years of sun and silence. He entered her room quietly, almost shyly, carrying a folded shawl. "You might need this," he said, avoiding her gaze. Aisha accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you for saving me." He nodded but said nothing. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder. In the following days, Aisha began healing physically first, then slowly, emotionally. The village doctor came once, nodded approvingly, and prescribed bed rest and nutrition. Naji fed her lovingly, refusing to let her lift a finger. And Haroon, though quiet, built her a wooden stool, fixed the broken door hinge in her room, and left fresh herbs by her bedside without a word. Aisha started noticing things. The faded photos on Naji's mantle, a child's shoe tucked into a drawer, Haroon's eyes darkening whenever he passed by the river. There was pain in this house, too. One afternoon, while peeling apples on the porch, Aisha asked softly, "Did you lose someone?" Naji hesitated, then nodded. "My daughter, years ago. Illness took her before she turned 10, and Haroon lost his wife and child during childbirth. After that, he stopped speaking much. But saving you, it's the first time I've seen." His eyes come alive in years. Aisha felt a lump rise in her throat. "I'm so sorry." Naji reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "Pain knows pain. That's why you're here. And that's why you're staying until you're strong enough to face whatever waits beyond that river." In the safety of that modest home, Aisha found something unexpected. A cocoon of compassion, quiet strength, and unspoken understanding. Her nightmares came less frequently. She began to eat more, sleep better. The baby kicked stronger every day. She didn't know what she would do next, or if Safar even thought she was alive. But she knew one thing now. She had survived for a reason, and when the time came, she would rise not just for herself, but for her child. Zafar hadn't always been cold. There was a time, brief and unsteady, when his marriage to Aisha had glimmered with promise. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and came from a respected family that lent his empire a refined traditional sheen. Their wedding had been the social event of the year, the union of business and beauty. But even on their wedding night, Zafar had felt it, that hollow space inside him that Aisha's quiet smile couldn't reach. He admired her, certainly. She was kind, loyal, intelligent, but love? No, that had always felt like a luxury. He couldn't afford enter Marina. She had first appeared at an investor's gala 3 years ago, wearing a crimson gown and a storm in her eyes. She was bold, unapologetically ambitious, and refused to be overshadowed by anyone, not even Ege. Unlike his wife, Marina never bowed her head. She challenged him, taunted him, seduced him with her intellect as much as her body dot. It started as an affair of convenience meetings behind closed doors, private messages on encrypted apps, whispered plans for later. But for Marina, it was never about love. It was about positioning. "I'm not here to be someone's secret," she had said once, curling her fingers around his tie. "I want a seat at the head of the table." Zafar had laughed at the time, but Marina wasn't joking. Her claws went deep into his business decisions, his social circles, even his marriage. When Aisha announced her pregnancy, everything shifted. Zafar had expected distance to form between him and Marina. Instead, she became more involved, more calculating. Her mask slipped one night as they shared a drink in his private lounge. "She'd trap you with that child," Marina said calmly, swirling her wine. "And when she does, everything we've built, me and you, it'll disappear." Zafar had said nothing, but his silence had been taken as permission. What began as subtle manipulation, removing Aisha from event invites, freezing her access to business accounts, soon darkened. Marina planted ideas like poison in his mind. "She's weak, clumsy, depressed. One accident and it'll be over. No suspicion. No scandal." He hated how logical it sounded. Still, Zafar hadn't agreed to anything outright. He was a coward in that way. But Marina had always been bold enough for both of them. She orchestrated it all: the gala, the riverside garden, the confrontation. She had sent Aisha to that edge, and Zafar had let her go. Now, in the quiet of his penthouse, surrounded by wealth and silence, he remembered the sound of Marina's laughter as they toasted freedom. But all he could feel now was dread, because sometimes he swore he heard water dripping in the silence. Sometimes he saw Aisha in his dream-soaked, breathless, staring at him with eyes that no longer loved or feared him. She was gone, or so he thought. But Zafar Malik had learned too late. You can push guilt into the river, but it always leaves footprints behind. Zafar Malik stood in his corner office, high above the city skyline, staring at nothing. His empire, once a symbol of ambition and power, was crumbling like sand between his fingers. A board member had resigned without warning. 2 major investors had pulled out, citing reputational risk. Rumors swirled about internal corruption, hidden losses, and the scandal surrounding Aisha's disappearance. Every glossy surface of his office reflected a man unraveling, but none of it compared to what haunted him most. It started small shadows that moved in mirrors when no one else was there. A fleeting scent of jasmine in the hallway, Aisha's favorite perfume. Then came the dreams. Aisha in her pale wedding dress, dripping with river water, standing silently at the foot of his bed. Her hands cradled her swollen belly. Her eyes were not angry. They were empty. Every time he woke, he was drenched in sweat, gasping like a man drowning. In meetings, he found himself zoning out, hearing her voice whisper his name behind closed doors. He dismissed staff who reminded him of her, avoided places they had once gone together. Marina noticed his growing distance, the way he snapped at small things and flinched at the sound of running water. "You need to pull yourself together," she snapped one evening. "The world sees you cracking. And if you crack, we both go down." Zafar stared at her, eyes bloodshot. "Do you see her too?" he asked quietly. Marina's mouth went tight. "There's no her anymore. She's gone." But Zafar wasn't so sure. In the quietest moments, when the city slept and silence crept in, he heard the splash again. The final scream. The image of Ajisha falling haunted him like a looped film reel behind his eyelids. He'd traded his soul for freedom, for lust, for empire. And now, nothing brought him peace. Not the wealth, not the luxury, not even Marina's touch. Guilt had a grip on him, and it wasn't letting go. Each time he stepped into the shower, the sound of water made him freeze. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the life he destroyed. Not just Aisha, but the child, the heartbeat he never felt. The future he never gave a chance. Zafar Malik had everything, and now he had only ghosts. Aisha stood by the riverside, barefoot on the cool earth, her hands gently resting on the curve of her belly. The breeze carried the scent of wild jasmine and river salt, reminding her of the night everything had changed. 8 months pregnant now, she looked stronger, fuller, and very much alive. The bruises had faded. The nightmares still came, but they no longer ruled her. Harun's home, with its silence and safety, had been a sanctuary, but she knew she couldn't hide forever. Not from the world. Not from the truth. Her child kicked, a sudden, strong movement. Aisha smiled faintly. "You're getting impatient too, aren't you?" She had been journaling, daily recording memories, timelines, facts. She remembered Marina's voice, Zafar's silence, the way the river had swallowed her whole. She had survived the impossible. And for what? To remain a ghost? No, she would not let her child be born into a lie. One evening, while Naji prepared lentils in the kitchen, Aisha cleared her throat. "I need to leave," she said gently. "Soon?" Naji looked up, brows furrowed. "It's not safe yet." "You're almost at term. Why now?" "Because," Aisha replied, her voice firm, "if I don't go now, they win. Marina wins, and Zafar, he gets to live without consequences." Naji said nothing for a long time. Then, with a soft sigh, she nodded. "Then we'll help you. Harun will take you." Aisha didn't expect Harun to speak when she told him. But the night before they left, he came to her room, holding a wooden box. Inside was a silver chain delicate with a small crescent moon pendant. "My wife wore it when she was expecting," he said quietly. "She would have wanted you to have it." Aisha's eyes welled with tears. "I'll protect this. And I'll protect this child." The next morning, dressed in plain clothes and wrapped in a shawl, Aisha boarded a bus to the city with Harun beside her. The roads twisted through mountains and open plains. Her heart thudded with a mix of anxiety and determination. As the skyline of the city appeared in the distance, Aisha's posture straightened. She had been erased, but she would reappear, not as a victim. As a witness, she would walk into that world again, not for revenge, but for justice. Her unborn child deserved the truth. The world deserved the truth. The woman they had tried to bury was coming, back. Alive, unbroken. And ready to speak. The ballroom sparkled beneath chandeliers as violinists played softly, weaving a delicate backdrop to the laughter and clinking glasses of the city's elite. The charity gala was Marina's moment. She had planned it meticulously, down to the color of the orchids in every centerpiece. Dressed in a backless emerald gown, she moved through the crowd like a queen, her fingers grazing Zafar's arm possessively. Zafar, however, looked distracted. His eyes darted to the door every few minutes, his hands trembling slightly around his glass of whiskey. "Smile," Marina whispered in his ear, teeth clenched. "We've made it." But Zafar wasn't smiling. He couldn't shake the feeling crawling up his spine that something was about to go terribly wrong. At the top of the marble grand staircase, a hush suddenly rippled through the crowd. One by one, conversations died and heads turned. The musicians faltered, and then they saw her. Aisha, dressed in soft ivory, her swollen belly unmistakable beneath the flowing fabric. Her face serene and unflinching, she stood beneath the spotlight like a ghost from the grave. But she wasn't a ghost. She was flesh and bone and breath. Alive. Zafar's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Marina paled, her eyes wide with disbelief. No, she whispered. This isn't possible. Aisha descended the staircase slowly, her hand resting on the railing for support. Each step was a declaration. The crowd parted instinctively, their shocked murmurs rising into a storm of gasps and whispers. I was never dead, Aisha said, voice steady and amplified. But someone here wanted me to be. The press was already snapping photos. Live streams were activated. And then Aisha reached into her clutch and pulled out a flash drive. This, she said, holding it high, contains voice recordings, private messages, and financial transfers proving a conspiracy to silence me permanently. Gasps, a few shrieks, a camera flash. Zafar stepped forward, his voice trembling. Aisha, wait, we can talk. No, Zafar, she interrupted. You had your chance. And you stood by while she tried to kill me? Marina lunged, perhaps to grab the drive, perhaps to silence Aisha once and for all, but Haroon, dressed plainly, stepped from the wings and blocked her path. 2 uniformed officers followed right behind him. You're both under arrest, one of them said coldly. Zafar's knees buckled. The great staircase, once a symbol of power and prestige, had become the stage of reckoning, and Aisha betrayed. Wife, survivor, mother to be stood tall, her past behind her, and justice finally in reach. By the time the sun rose over the city, the news had already broken. Wife returns from the dead, millionaire and mistress arrested in shocking attempted murder plot. Exclusive, betrayed and buried, Aisha Malik strikes back with evidence. High society scandal, what Zafar and Marina tried to hide. Outside Zafar's corporate headquarters, dozens of cameras lined the gates. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones extended like weapons as flashing lights blurred together in a storm of exposure. Social media was ablaze. Hashtags trended globally. Aisha's name became a symbol of survival overnight, but inside the police headquarters, the air was far colder. Zafar sat slumped in the interrogation room, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. Across the table, a detective dropped a folder in front of him, its contents damning. Bank transfers to Marina's private account, all timed just days before Aisha's disappearance. A deleted text message recovered from Zafar's phone. Once she's gone, we'll be free to live without secrets. Marina's voice recordings discussing removing the obstacle and letting the river do the rest. Surveillance gaps from the gala, all traced back to a bribed staff member already in custody. The net had tightened, and Zafar had nowhere to run. I never touched her, he muttered weakly. I didn't push her. The detective leaned forward. You didn't have to. You funded it. You stayed silent. You let it happen. In a separate room, Marina was far less composed. Her hair was disheveled, her mascara smeared. The calm, polished veneer had cracked under pressure. I didn't mean to kill her. She screamed. She was in the way. I thought she'd drown. I didn't know she could swim. Technically, the officer replied coldly. She didn't. She survived. And now she's pressing charges. By mid-morning, both Zafar and Marina were formally charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit homicide, and financial fraud. Their bail was denied due to the overwhelming evidence and public outrage. Legal experts predicted a sensational trial. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for Aisha and no mercy for the rich." At home, Haroon switched off the news. He glanced over at Aisha, who sat in the armchair, cradling her belly. The child, inside her, stirred gently, as if sensing that the worst had passed. It's over, he said softly. Aisha didn't smile, but her eyes were calm. No, it's just beginning. She knew there would still be headlines, interviews, trials, whispers, but none of it scared her now. The truth had come to light, and that was enough for her baby, and for the countless women watching who had once been told to stay quiet. Zephyr and Marina had tried to bury her dot, but instead, they had buried themselves. The river flowed. Quietly, its surface calm and sun-dappled, no longer the menacing force it had once been in Aisha's nightmares. The same river that had tried to take her life now shimmered peacefully under the late afternoon sun, winding gently through the village like a thread of memory. On a wooden bench by the bank, Aisha sat with a soft smile on her lips, her arm wrapped protectively around her daughter. Little Zara cooed, reaching out her chubby hands toward a floating leaf drifting by. She was nearly a year old now, healthy, curious, with thick dark curls and wide eyes that carried her mother's strength and something of her father's intensity. Haroon stood behind them, gently rocking the handmade cradle he'd built now, repurposed to hold a picnic basket. His face, once so guarded and grim, was now lined with something gentler contentment, perhaps, or the quiet pride of having helped rescue a life and watched it bloom. She's going to want to climb trees before she learns to walk, he joked, watching Zara kick her legs with determination. Aisha laughed, a clear, unburdened sound. She's already tried, she said. She grabbed a handful of rose thorns last week, trying to crawl into the garden. Stubborn, Haroon mused. She gets it from both of us. A soft breeze passed through the reeds, and Aisha gazed out across the water. So much had changed since that night. Zafar and Marina were serving lengthy prison sentences, their trial broadcast across the country like a modern-day cautionary tale. The empire they'd tried to protect had crumbled. No appeals, no glamour, no spin. Just justice. Aisha, on the other hand, had quietly rebuilt her life. She didn't return to the city or the spotlight. She had declined all media interviews after the trial. Instead, she purchased a modest plot of land near the river, using part of the financial compensation to build a small shelter for women in need, those who, like her, had once felt unseen and unheard. She worked there part-time, side by side with Naji, while Haroon taught local boys how to fish and repair boats. The villagers no longer whispered about the woman who came back from the dead. Now they simply called her Ben Naisha's sister Aisha Dot as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in golden streaks. Zara wriggled in her mother's lap and reached again toward the water. Let her touch it, Haroon said gently. Aisha hesitated, then bent down and dipped her daughter's tiny fingers into the river. Dot, it was warm, alive. Dot, Zara giggled. Splashing. Dot, Aisha closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to life. The river hadn't taken her. Dot, it had rebirthed her. Dot, and now she flowed forward with love, with purpose, and with a daughter who would never grow up afraid of her own voice.